Hi guys, this is Pranav here from Prepco. Welcome to lecture 5 of our legal reasoning series. In today's lecture, we will be looking at constitutional law. Of course, constitutional law is too broad to be covered, and it's not needed. You need not know everything about our constitution as of now. So, in today's lecture, we will mostly be focusing on the fundamental rights aspect. I will also be giving you a brief about the preamble and the directive principles of state policy. So let's start with what is the meaning of constitution. What is a constitution? So our constitution, which was the Indian Constitution of 1950, it is the most basic law of the land. Um, that is it is the grund norm. Another term for it is the grund norm. So this is the first law actually. So every other law flows from the constitution, and every other law will be tested against the constitution. The if any law is violative of the constitution, then it is void. The courts will strike it down to be void. Then the constitution also establishes the character of the government. So the current framework of our government, that is there will be two houses of parliament, there will be a Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. This will be the number of MPs elected to the Lok Sabha, the manner of appointment of MPs to Lok Sabha, etc. Everything is governed by the constitution. The constitution provides all of that. The constitution provides there will be a Supreme Court. Constitution provides there will be a president. Constitution provides the powers of the president. Constitution provides the power to make laws. Everything is what is given through the constitution only. Constitution also provides the basic principles of the governance. So the basic principles of governance are what are contained under part 4 of the constitution, that is the directive principles of state policy. Furthermore, as I already told you, all other laws are derived from the constitution. So the 7th schedule of our constitution has 3 lists. It has the union list, it has the state list, and it has the concurrent list. Now under all of these lists are a series of subject matters, and these like the subject matters on which the governments can make laws. So union list contains a list of subject matters on which only the central government is empowered to make laws. The state list contains certain subject matters on which only the state can make laws. So for example, in the state list you will have police as a subject matter, and then in the concurrent list there are certain subject matters on which both the centers and the state can make laws. So this is so all of the laws are derived from the constitution. Then lastly, constitution also provides the rights of the people. So under part 3 there is something which is known as the fundamental rights. Now these are the rights which are we are entitled to, and the against these rights all laws will also be checked. So laws can be struck down on 2 grounds. So judicial review, the concept that you know, is something which can be struck down on 2 grounds. One is if it is ultra virus to the constitution, that means that it is against part 3 of our constitution. If it is against any of the fundamental rights, if a law is infringing any of the fundamental rights under part 3, then the courts will strike it down to be void. Another ground is if the government did not have the authority to enact the law, then also the courts will strike it down. So authority means the 3 lists that I told you. So for example, if the union government makes a law on something which is contained under list 2 of the schedule, which is the state list, then that law will be struck down. by the courts, because under our constitution the central government did not have the power to make that law. Only the state government had the power to make that law on the state subject. So this is how the constitution and judicial review works as a whole. So next I'll just tell you a few features of our constitution. So one is that I apologize for the typo in the title. Please ignore it. So the first thing is, our constitution is the lengthiest constitution in the world, and this is possible because it is a written constitution, right? So in certain countries, for example, like in the United Kingdom, there is no written constitution. So in United Kingdom, they do not have any written constitution. It is only a verbal like it is their constitution is derived only from case laws and all of that. So the principles of governance, etc., are derived from case laws and all. There is no written constitution, and so the authority of the government there is extreme. Here we have a written constitution. Everything will be checked against the written constitution. It is the lengthiest constitution in the world with 448 articles and 12 schedules. Secondly, we have a federal structure under a constitution. Federal structure means a dual system of governance. Like we have a state governments as well as a central government, and the powers of both are delineated. So state governments have their own powers, central government has their own powers. So federal structure basically means that. Next, we have a secular state. Our preamble itself specifies that India is a secular state, right? Then we have a parliamentary form of government. This is also given under through our constitution itself. Next, we have a universal adult franchise, which means that every adult is capable of voting. In India, all adults above 18 years of age, if you are 18 years of age, you can get a voter ID and you are authorized to vote. Next, we have an independent judiciary. So under the constitution only, both the high courts and the high court and supreme courts are formed, right? The constitution only says that there will be a Supreme Court of India and there will be high courts. Now the mode of appointment of judges and all is also given under the constitution. Next, the judicial review is also something which is given under the constitution in the form of articles 226 and articles 32. Article 32 is the power to the Supreme Court to issue writs, and 226 is the power to high courts to issue writs. I will also tell you what writs are later on. Next, our constitution has fundamental rights and fundamental duties of citizens and persons. So fundamental rights are governed under part 3, and fundamental duties are something which is given under part 4 of our constitution, along with the directive principles of state policy. So these are few of the salient features of our constitution. So let's move on to our preamble. Our preamble is something which is like an introduction to our constitution. Our preamble reads as: we, the people of India, constitute a socialist, secular, democratic republic, securing justice. So justice is of 3 types. Under the preamble, we have the constitution is to secure justice, which is social, economic and political. Then liberty, another word for liberty is freedom. So it gives freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. Then we have the equality of status and opportunity amongst all persons, and it also seeks to promote fraternity between the citizens and different the government as well, and the states, and unity of the nation as a whole. So these are so the preamble is giving certain aims, right? And it is so in the next slide I will tell you what the preamble is, the importance of the preamble. So the preamble is containing the enacting clause, which is bringing the constitution in the force. It is declaring the basic type of government and the polity which is sought to be established. So where it says that we have a democratic republic, and we have a and the this republic should secure justice, which is all three: social, economic, and political, for all the persons living there, right? So these are the ideas which the preamble tells us, and these individual ideas are then found under different articles of our constitution. Then the preamble is also declaring the great rights and freedoms of the citizens, and this is something which the constitution gives us. So it says that all the liberty part is something which is to be given to the person, the citizen living there. So as per the preamble, everyone should have the liberty of thought, we should have the liberty of expression, we should have liberty of belief, faith, and worship. So and then these freedoms are something which are found under part 3 of the constitution. And lastly, the preamble also throws a light on the source of the constitution. How was the constitution formed? So this is the constitution was formed by the people of India. It is we who give the constitution its powers. It was we who formed a constituent assembly with various representatives, and our own constituent assembly sat down and drafted this entire constitution. And it is we who elect our governments, and it is the governments who then govern our country based on this constitution. And of course there have been numerous amendments to the constitution as well. So now the role of the preamble. So preamble assists the interpretation of provisions of the constitution. So if there is a dispute with regards to interpretation of any article, so earlier now so that article has been removed, but earlier article 31 was a great source of confrontation between the courts and the government. So article 31 and one clause of article 19 earlier gave a fundamental right over property to the citizens. Now so I'm diverting for a bit to give you an idea of how preamble assists the interpretation of the provision. So as you are aware, initially if you are not aware, I'll just let you know. Initially in after 1950s, when the Congress government was in force, they had a socialist ideology. So under socialism, they felt that we should try and bring down the economic inequality which existed there. So earlier in the colonial times, there was a existing zamindari system in our country, and a few zamindars held on to large areas of land. So the government brought in different land control legislations, by which they said that one person cannot hold more than X amount of land. So when these laws were brought, they were challenged on the basis of these articles, the fundamental rights over property, and this led to a long confrontation between the courts and the government, and it was also the cause for numerous constitutional amendments over time. So during that time, the courts had used the preamble to interpret the articles of the constitution to see their validity, etc. So this is how the preamble is important as an interpretation of provisions of the constitution. And secondly, preamble is also a source of interpretation of statutes framed under the constitution. So if any law is formed under the constitution, so if we see the recent the Citizenship Amendment Act, so the challenge to against that is pending before the courts. So when they will interpret the whether it is valid or not, I'm sure one of the arguments that will be presented against it is that this is going against the secular nature of our constitution, and for that preamble can be used to say that preamble itself is saying that we have a secular state, and this Citizenship Amendment Act is going against that, against the secular principles of our constitution. So this is how preamble can be used as a source of interpretation of statutes. Right. So moving on from the preamble, we have I'll move straight to the fundamental rights. So fundamental rights are something which are provided under part 3 of the constitution, and they are certain basic, natural and inalienable rights. Some rights are available only to citizens of the country, whereas some rights are available to all persons who are present in the country. So even if even if a tourist is present in the country, he is not a citizen of the of India, still he will be have certain rights as per our constitution. So I'll just give you a brief of the rights first, and then we will delve into specifics over each right. So the right to equality is something which is present and from Article 14 to Article 18. All these 4 articles define the contours of the right to equality. Then right to freedom is there under 19 to 22. Right against exploitation is found under Articles 23 and 24. Right to freedom of religion is under Articles 25 to 28. Then cultural and educational rights are provided under Articles 29 and 30. And lastly, the right to constitutional remedies or right to judicial review, however you want to read it, is something which is given under Article 32 and also Article 226, but of course 226 is not a part of part 3. So yeah, as I told you, some rights are available only to citizens of the country, whereas some are available to all persons. For example, Articles 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30 are available only to citizens, whereas Articles 14, 20, 21, 23, 24, 26, 27, 28 are available to all persons, whether they are citizens of the country or not. Furthermore, fundamental rights are enforceable only against the state. Now this is very important, and this is something that sorry, not as per Article 13, as per Article 12 this is provided, right? Now what is Article 12? What is a state? Now Article 12 of the Constitution provides the meaning of state. Now it says that of course government and Parliament of India, which is the executive and legislature of the union, that is the president and the both the houses of legislature, that will constitute a state, and any action of this of the government and Parliament of the India can be challenged for violating your fundamental rights. Next, also the government and legislature of each state will come within the meaning of state for the purposes of part 3. Next, we also have all local or other authorities which are under the control of the government of India. So under this you will have various educational institutions which are an arm of the state or which receive substantial state funding, or which are under the control of the government of India, even if not directly, indirectly, all of those come within the definition of state. So, to illustrate what all local or other authorities means, so under this we will find all NLUs. For example, all NLUs are will come within the definition of state because they receive substantial state funding, and their executive council is also something, and their constitution is through state legislature. They have substantial state control over them basically. Next, all public sector banks, State Bank of India, Reserve Bank, even that is state because it has substantial state control. So, by these illustrations, we understand what is the meaning of state. Next, what is a law? So, Article 13 will provide that any law which is in violation of Part 3 is void. But it is important to know what is a law, right, for the meaning of the Constitution. Also, Article 13 says that any law which is existing at the time of enactment of the Constitution, or if it is enacted after the coming in force of the Constitution, both shall be tested against the Part 3. So, for as you are aware, there are even till date there are a lot of colonial laws which are continuing in force. For example, the Indian Penal Code was codified in 1860 and it is still in force today. However, the even that is subject to Part 3 of the Constitution. So, if any person wants to challenge a section of the any section of the Indian Penal Code for violation of Part 3, he is welcome to do that, and the courts will certainly examine the section's validity if it comes into question. For example, recently section 377 of the Constitution, it was read down because the courts found that it was violating Part 3 of our Constitution, in the sense that it was infringing the Article 21 of the LGBTQ community. So, this is how we see a legislation of 1860, one section of that being read down today. So, as per Article 13, law would include any ordinance, order, bylaw, rule, regulation, notification, custom or usage having the force of law. So, anything, basically any executive action, any legislative action, all of that will come under Article 13. Even policies, for example, the National Education Policy, even though it has not been enacted yet through certain acts, but if the court, if any person feels that the National Education Policy is violating any fundamental any of his fundamental rights, then even that can be challenged before courts on that ground. Now, so this is what we mean by law. Now, another important dispute which led to the landmark Keshavanand Bharati judgment was the question whether Article 368, which gives the Parliament power to amend the Constitution, whether that constitutes law for the purposes of Article 13. So, I am not sure if you are aware, but in the landmark IC Golaknath judgment, the court, the Supreme Court, had gone against its earlier judgments and held that Article 368 is law. So, what is the effect of that? So, effectively, if Article 368 comes under the definition of law for the purposes of Article 13, then every amendment of the government will be checked if that amendment is violating fundamental rights or not. So effectively the government can never amend any of the fundamental rights, right? And so this was read down. This IC Golaknath was then overruled in the Keshavanand Bharati judgment, and the 13 bench court of the 13 judges bench of the Supreme Court laid down that Article 368 is not law. However, it imposed the basic structure doctrine and said that the government can amend any part of the constitution except the basic structure of the constitution, that the government cannot amend the basic structure of the constitution. So, and what is basic structure is something which is not defined, and it is something which is evolved from future case decisions. So certain examples of basic structure is the republic form of government, judicial review. All these have been held to be part of basic structure of the constitution, right?
Hey guys, just a short break in the middle of the class to tell you to check out our website or follow the link in the description below to join our test series. We're going to be having sectional tests, full tests, a lot of practice material. Do check out our website. Cheers.
So now let's move on to individual rights. So firstly we have Article 14. Now Article 14 is guarantees to all persons, so this is not limited to citizens. It guarantees equality before law and equal protection of all laws, right? So basically no person will be treated differently by the laws, by the state. Importantly, this article only talks about equality among equals. So this gives the government the power to make reasonable classification. So what does equality among equals means? So the constitution makers understood that in India there is a certain inequality. There are certain privileges. So I, for one, am not an equal with a scheduled caste villager or any scheduled caste person, because I have enjoyed a privilege. I have a very rich household. I have everything provided to me. I have a lot more opportunities. So the Article 14 allows the state to reasonably add a reasonably classification in any of its laws and treat me differently from that scheduled caste person for a specific reason, right? To empower the scheduled caste person. So reasonable classification is something due to which we will see how this can lead to a lot of things. So another idea of reasonable classification can be seen under in the recent UGC notifications. So if you are aware that recently due to the COVID pandemic, exams, a lot of institutions said that we will not have exams. Even even these law universities decided that it is better to award degrees etc. on the basis of previous semester marks. However, the UGC came out with a notification which said that exams are mandatory for final year students, and for all other earlier year students you may promote them on the basis of average semester marks. So the UGC guidelines treated the final year students differently from other students. However, the court held that this was a reasonable classification. it said that the Supreme Court said that final year students are different from other students, and they gave reasons for that. So this is how reasonable classification was justified by the government before the court, and the court upheld that reasonable classification. So next we have Article 15. Now Article 15 prohibits discrimination only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. So what this means is that if there is any discrimination, if any law is discriminating only on the grounds of any of these, that for example, if there is reservation, right, but the reservation is only because of any of these grounds, then it will be struck void. However, with these grounds there has to be another ground, like the inherent backward, the social backwardness. So that is how the states have to justify reservation. States need to conduct studies. States need to collect data to show why the sections that they are giving reservation, how they have suffered, how are they backwards. So this is why the states need to collect data to justify reservation. They cannot just one day come out and say that this person belongs to X caste and that is why we are giving him reservation, right? They need to justify that on one ground which is other than caste as well, that is inherent backwardness. He hasn't been getting the same opportunities as the other castes. All of that needs to be satisfied by the state. So under Article 15 and Article 16, the state is permitted to make special provisions for women, children, socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and the recent 103rd Amendment brought in the concept of economically weaker sections of society, right, in education. So this is the broad idea behind Article 15. Next we have Article 16. So also, if in case you have any doubts, because I understand this is a very this is a complicated subject, and for constitution I have gone into more detail than I have in the earlier lectures. So in case you have any doubts, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and we will be happy to resolve all of them. So next we have Article 16, which provides equality of opportunity in matters of public employment. So this governs both initial appointment and promotion. So Article 16 prohibits discrimination only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence. And similar to Article 15, the state has been permitted to make special laws for backward class of citizens and economically weaker sections. So even though Article 16, the reservation clause is worded differently from Article 15, it has been read to mean the same by the court. So state is still permitted to make reservation for women in matters of employment, even though specifically women, the making special provisions for women is not provided under Article 16. And as I explained, the reservation cannot be only on the ground of caste or only on the ground of sex. So some other conditions also need to be mentioned. Similarly, domicile, for example, the domicile reservation which you see prevalent in a lot of universities. So that is also not something which is on the place of birth. I'm going back a bit. Under Article 15, which is reservation in the Article 15, which provides for reservation in matters of education. If you see the first part, it does not contain place of residence in it, right? So because domicile is a discrimination on the basis of place of residence, that is why it has been allowed. If it was place of birth, that then it would be struck down under article 15, but because it is on the basis of place of residence of the person, that is why domicile reservation is permitted today. So yeah, then we have article 16, which is which I have explained. Next we have article 17. Now article 17 abolishes untouchability. Now the for these this article we have, so under different articles we have different enabling legislations as well. So for article 17 we have the Protection of Civil Rights Act. So the act is what criminalizes untouchability, but article 17 is the is the idea behind it. Article 17 is abolishing untouchability, right? Next we have article 18. Now article 18 talks about abolition of titles. Now what is the idea behind this article? So the reason was the colonial government, our British overlords had used to give different titles to different persons who were loyal to them, and this created conflict between the freedom fighters and the titled class. And so to remove all of this, the government sought to abolish titles entirely. So all hereditary titles given by the British were abolished, and no one is permitted to have any prefix or suffix attached to its name. Of course, military and academic titles are not included. So that is why Lieutenant XYZ is permitted, Colonel XYZ is permitted, or Doctor XYZ is permitted. But national awards, the awards do not vitiate article 18. However, they cannot be added as a suffix or prefix to the name of a person. So this is the idea behind article 18. So here we've completed the rights to equality part. Now we've come to the freedoms, the articles on the freedoms of the persons. So article 19, which is one of the most important fundamental rights.